South Korea's Unification Ministry hosted an international forum in Seoul on North Korea's human rights situation last week in the administration's continuing efforts to raise awareness on the issue. This came shortly before South Korea co-sponsored a UN General Assembly resolution condemning human rights violations by the North. Although it was the 18th consecutive year for the resolution to be adopted, it was the first time in 4 years that South Korea had co-sponsored it. For more on the efforts being made by Seoul and the international community to address this issue, we have joining us via video today South Korea's ambassador for North Korean human rights, Shin-wha. Ambassador Lee, thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let us start with that event hosted by the Seoul's Unification Ministry. It was called the 2022 International Dialogue on North Korean Human Rights. It was also sponsored by the United Nations Human Rights Office here in Seoul. And the Unification Minister, Kwon Young-se himself, delivered the opening address. I understand that you served as moderator for the event, Ambassador Lee. So can you tell us how did the event go, and can you give us a summary of some of the major issues that were discussed there?
Okay. Well, actually, I'm not only moderator. I was a kind of a designer to make that happen. The reason I just work with Ministry of Unification to hold that conference is mainly because of the two reasons. Number one, as you see in my title, it's important is international cooperation on the North Korean human rights issues, right? But as you know, human rights issues should be a very universal, but unfortunately, not only in this country, in North Korea, but also in international community, it's been largely politicized and polarized over what we will describe as the human rights issue, particularly North Korean human rights issues, depending on political circumstances. Therefore, during my short tenure and the limited capacity, I kind of try to make a political, domestic, and global consensus over what we mean by North Korean human rights. I know it is very difficult, but I would like to give a try. So that thankfully, both Ministry of Unification and Foreign Affairs have been very helpful for me for that causes. So at the very first event, I just convened this international conference, which was largely supported by not only Minister of Unification, but also former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was there in person to talk about it. And also, it was a kind of international hybrid conference because it was I only have a very short time period to prepare, so it wasn't that easy to invite all international eminent scholars to Seoul at the end of the year. So that I decided to making on and offline so-called hybrid conferences. So where Robert Kim, who was a former U.S. Special Envoy, and also Professor Jin Gyuk from Stanford and Victor Cha from Georgetown University, who've been long committed on this issue, and also James Heenan from the Seoul UN Human Rights Seoul office, the representatives. He's newly appointed, as you know, and also my predecessor 5 years ago. We had the 1 year term for the ambassador on this my position, the Professor Lee Jung-hoon, who was there as well. So those people were getting together for the first sessions, talk about why accountability is very important when we address the North Korean human rights issues. At the same time, we're highlighting if we can only mention about the accountability, it's going to be very hard to somehow talk or work with the North Korean regime, because those regime is obviously the actor who perpetuate the human rights, the violation, right? So that how we can make a so-called constructive engagement, including humanitarian assistance, can do something to improve the North Korean human rights issue. So together with accountability. So that is what we've been discussing for the first session. And in related to that subject, for the second session, we invited NGOs and civil society and some scholars who's been working for a long while on this issue. So that is the kind of the basic idea what I and by help of the unification, the ministry did this conference.
Sure. So this event was essentially your brainchild. You were the one, the driving force behind it. But as we mentioned, you were supported by the Unification Ministry and the current administration. It seems like this administration is looking to take on the North Korean human rights issue head on. How would you describe the administration's stance on this issue, and how is Seoul and the Unification Ministry planning to continue to address it moving forward?
Well, I don't. I'm not in a position to represent the position of the Ministry of Unification, as you know. But if I can roughly talk about what Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Unification just endeavor to work to improve the North Korean human rights issue is, while they are supporting the principle of accountability, because that is not only the matter of the punishment for those perpetrators, but also that can be a kind of preventive measures for the future, like outright the crime, right?
Hmm.
So that's one thing. But unlike just a previous conservative government, I would say they also are interested in engagement as well, because the humanitarian assistance is very important, if not the critical means to improve North Korea human right and livelihood of North Korean ordinary people, right? So that as you can see from the government's audacious initiative or bold initiative, it's not only accountability but also those the constructive engagement, including humanitarian assistance, are kind of the, I would say, dual track what current government try to pursue in terms of this subject.
Sure. It was also interesting that this forum came shortly before the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution condemning human rights violations by North Korea. That took place last Thursday, local time in New York. It was the 18th consecutive year for the resolution to be passed, but the first to be co-sponsored by South Korea in 4 years. This year's resolution also added calls for North Korea to release all information pertaining to foreign nationals subjected to human rights violations by the regime, while expressing concerns over what was referred to as the illegal detention, torture and execution of foreign nationals. This also comes as South Korea has been exerting efforts to obtain information on the shooting death of a Seoul fisheries official by North Korean soldiers in 2020, an incident that has become very controversially political in South Korea at the moment. But going back to that UN resolution first, what do you make of this year's resolution? How significant was it?
Okay. As you indicate as well, it marks the 18th consecutive year, right? That is the pen holder state was it's a usual suspect European Union, but that is the kind of the things with highlighting for international closer efforts to improve the human rights conditions in the North Korea, which is a very reclusive and very dictatorial state, right? And this resolution, as I said, the European Union has been championed for this, expressed that grave concerns over very like a serious, dire human rights situation in impoverished the North Korea. Uh, while they also expressed and calling for what we should do to deal with those illegal detention, torture, and arbitrary killing or execution of including foreign nationals in these countries. And 63 countries join in here as a co-sponsorship country, including Korea. And as you mentioned, the first time in 4 years, Korea was joined. But I want to recall you that in the third committee of the UN General Assembly in November, unanimously adopted this resolution. And North Korean envoy to the UN at the time, the Ambassador Kim, right, is rejected and condemned, harshly condemned this resolution, indicating that it is a grave, politically motivated, fabricated provocations aimed at undermining the North Korea's socialist system and the infringement of the sovereign state and etc. But I think it is very important because this resolution is called for not only like improve the North Korean ordinary people's livelihood, but also the right to information. So release all information related to foreign nationals subjects to human rights violation by the regime. I think that is noteworthy as well. And in the beginning, you asked me about the Ministry of Unification sponsored the International Hybrid Conference, right? That I explained. But afterwards, as I said, that was a kind of the first series, and the second and third was happening as well, both conducted in Korean last Monday. And one of them is what I call high-profile expert seminar, where I invited the former minister or ambassadors who happen to be also the professors, both who have a policy and academic experience, but several of them highlighting, well, it is great news for the South Korea the becoming a co-sponsored state, but hopefully in the future we can be a pen-holder state like a European Union, so that we can kind of initiate this kind of resolution. Because obviously, as we all know, North Korea is not anybody to us, right? As a former ambassador has mentioned before, and also this is the kind of the our issues as well. So hopefully, as I said, as I continue to having this kind of meeting, we can having a better idea and better strategies to how we South Korea can more effectively and more creatively engaging in international dialogue, UN debate, or UN resolution to virtually improve the North Korean human rights conditions.
Sure. And also the new calls, as you mentioned in the resolution, for the release of all information pertaining to foreign nationals subjected to human rights violations by the regime. Would you say the case with the South Korean officials, the South Korean fisheries official that was shot to death in 2020, that is a relevant example that for the new calls to be made in the resolution, you're saying?
I believe so, because there are large controversies in our country, right? I think that is a pretty wasteful political dialogue. We are here talking about some human rights. It's not just like a question of. I'm referring, by the way, both to those the unfortunate the killing, unfortunate deaths by like hostile killing by the North Korea's Mr. Lee, and also like forced repatriation of those two fishermen, North Korean fishermen to North Korea. So like some political party was highlighting like whether it is like forceful, I'm sorry, like the voluntary like coming to the north, or whether these two fishermen is kind of a crime committer and etc. I think those things are when it comes to the action itself, like North Korea killed our nationals, and then also those two fishermen against their own will or forcibly repatriated. That is a matter of the violation of international law. I think that is the essence what we have to discuss when it comes to their human rights. But I think we've been like too much politicized over this issue. So try to kind of avoid or like dilute the essence what we have to deal with. So I'm glad that this current government tried to deal with the essence of what went wrong. So I think that is a key issue, and that was obviously supported by international community, as you see in this the resolution.
Let me also ask you briefly about your recent visit to Japan, where you discussed the issue of Japanese abductees in the north. Seoul's foreign ministry said you held talks with Japan's chief cabinet secretary, Matsuno Hirokazu, and explained Seoul's policy on North Korea's human rights. Is there anything more you can tell us about what was discussed and how South Korea and Japan can cooperate to address the human rights issue in North Korea?
Okay. Well, I was invited by Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of Japan. So together with me, they invited also the Elizabeth Salmon, who is a special rapporteur of the United Nations. So both two of us were like keynote speakers in international symposium, which was followed by those abductees' families and students, like the discussion about how they so have been suffering because of the since the Japan, I'm sorry, North Korea abducted their daughters or mothers and etc. So anyway, while Elizabeth Salmon highlighting the importance of the UN and international community's attention and cooperations for Japanese the remaining allegedly remaining abductees in North Korea, it turned out to be 12 abductees. Because out of the 17 abductees officially acknowledged by the North Korean, the Kim Jong-il, only five came back to Japan, so 12 left. So I think those 12, they want to highlight, they want them to come back, or they want to know about their news. So it was all-out effort, national effort they've been working on. But in the meantime, what I highlight is we South Korea has 500 at least 516 abductees who are still in North Korea. And in addition, also we have 6 abductee and detainees who's been officially recognized by North Korea. So what I told them is it would be great we South Korea and Japan could work together to raise the awareness about this issue of the abductees and advocate for their release. It's because Japan only focusing on their 12 abductees. So I just highlighting our co-work so that they could include robbing the international community and participating in multilateral effort to address this issue.
Sure.
And also one thing I told to the minister when I met them, the collaboration on sanction is also important for two countries as well. And also, as you know, when it's very hard for Korea and Japan military cooperation. It's very difficult, right? Even
Sure.
in the event of Korean military provocation, because that faced the large domestic and neighboring countries' opposition and blame. But probably this bilateral cooperation between two countries should be less difficult in the area of human rights, which in turn
Sure.
contribute to our bilateral future-oriented cooperation. That was I was highlighting too when I'm meeting with several the high official of the Japan ministries, and also I had an opportunity to meet with the family members of the abductees, including Yokoda, uh, who's been a very highlighting person in Japan. But thankfully, the mother, the Yokomi, help me the name, I just but she was very calm,
Sure.
and she agreed with me together with her son, highlighting the importance of the bilateral contributions. And he think she said when she was addressing Japanese abductee problem, including her daughter, it would be good if we can talk about the Korean abductees issues or other foreign abductee the problems. So I think that was the
Ambassador,
good success for
we
me.
are unfortunately running out of time. So let me just ask you one more question. What do you think more can be done by South Korea and the international community to address the North Korea human rights issue, especially when some are saying that perhaps that is an issue that needs to be resolved after North Korea's denuclearization?
Okay. Sorry, I don't have enough time. I have so many other things to discuss with you. And hopefully, we can have another time to talk about it. Well, let me tell you this. When it comes to North Korean human rights issue, at least 3 issues have to be addressed. Number one, North Korean people within North Korea. And number two is those overseas defectors, particularly in China. We have to make sure they are not forcefully repatriated to the North Korea, where they are subject to harsh punishment, if not killing itself. And then third is the issue of the POW, prisoner of war, and also post-war abductees and detainees problems. While Japan making that is a national, like the priority agenda, I think we sidelined those human rights issues in the serious consideration of inter-Korean relationships. But look what happens. Well, North Korea has their own timetable for nuclear development or like military provocations and then etc. So that we have taken our own agenda and our own timetable and our own international cooperations to improve North Korean human rights issues. I think I do believe the North Korean military provocation and human rights abuses are the two sides of the same coin. We have to link those things as a package to pursue it. I think that is the only way we can effectively address the problem of North Korea questions.
Well, we appreciate you making the time to speak to us today on these issues. We've been speaking to Shin-wha, South Korea's ambassador for North Korean human rights. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you very much.